we have a really great group of folks assembled here today. I'm going to introduce the facilitator for the panel. Bernie Sanders has been a champion for all the issues that the Workers' Center and the labor movement have been fighting for years and years and years. And the best part about what he's been able to do working with us is not only has he gone down to Washington and fought hard on issues that affect us here, but he has stood in solidarity more than anyone else, any elected official, with fights on the ground in Vermont, from nursing home workers and construction workers to the nurses next door at Fletcher Allen, to the staff here at UVM, to right now to the Stanley workers who are organizing in St. Albans, Vermont. Bernie has been there supporting them. So we're really pleased to be able to have him facilitate this panel. Please give a big warm welcome to Bernie Sanders.
Thank you. James, thank you very much for that kind introduction, and thank you all very much for being here today. I don't have to tell anybody in the room that there are enormous issues, many enormous issues out there, whether it's the war in Iraq, whether it is the crisis in global warming, whether it is the terrible problems happening in the developing world, and on it goes. But it seems to me that the one way that we bring people together in our country is in the fight for social and economic justice, where we are all in it together. Our friends on the right try to split people. Their function in life is trying to divide people by race, by sexual gender, and in many other ways. And what we understand from a political perspective is that if working people stand together in the fight for economic and social justice, there is no stopping us in transforming America, and that's what this conference is about. I want to take just a brief moment in telling you a little bit of what I have observed just in the last month. Not over years, just in the last month. A few weeks ago, I was on a congressional delegation that went to the Ivory Coast and went to Ghana. And we took a look at child labor in those countries among cocoa growers. Those are the people who produce the chocolate that many of us eat. And what we were concerned about is that cocoa growing families earn as little as $400 or $500 a year. And under those conditions, children are working on the farms, exposed to pesticides, carrying heavy bundles, using machetes through which they injure themselves. People in the world today making $500 a year to supply the product that Nestle, Hershey, Mars family earn billions of dollars on. Global economy, exploitation at the most horrendous level so the chocolate manufacturers can become billionaires. Then, just last week, I was in a town called Immokalee, Florida, about 20 minutes away from Naples, Florida, which is one of the wealthiest communities in the United States of America. And I've seen a lot in my life. I've seen a lot of working conditions, but what I saw there really shocked me, and I don't shock easily. What I saw at 5:30 in the morning are hundreds of workers assembling in a parking lot to be picked up by school buses, where the driver or the crew chief would say, you are hired, not you, you're hired, you're hired, you're hired. Those people who were not hired sat there. We saw them at 8:30 and 9 o'clock, dejected. They were going to earn zero for the day because they make their money by piecework. The workers who were hired got on the bus, went a half hour, 45 minutes to the farm in which they were going to pick tomatoes for a penny and a half a pound. When they got to the farm, they didn't go to work picking tomatoes. They sat there for an hour, hour and a half, maybe longer, while the sun came out to dry the tomatoes, because you can't pick tomatoes when they're wet. Just sat there, no pay, no rights. These people earn on a yearly basis $10,000, $12,000, $14,000 a year doing back-breaking work in the hot sun. After a period of years, your knees go, and if you're older, you can't do that work anymore. They make a penny and a half a pound, and we are working right now on companies like Burger King to pay another penny a pound so that these people can have at least a living wage. And what some people say, well, you know, what is my concern? I don't intend to graduate from the University of Vermont and become a tomato picker. I know that. But in a culture and in a nation which is seeing a race to the bottom, I saw the bottom. That's it. Those are the most exploited workers in America. And so long as a culture exists in our nation which tolerates that kind of exploitation, every worker in America is endangered. So our job is to lift the bottom so that every worker in this country has dignity, has rights on the job, and has a decent standard of living. Then just last week, a few days ago, I was in St. Albans, Vermont, because workers who do immigration work are trying to form a union. And they're trying to form a union because we have an absurd situation that despite the fact that you're working for the federal government on very important immigration issues, a number of years ago those jobs have been privatized. And every 5 or 6 years, a new company comes along to run the process. And the new companies that came along said, oh, we're going to be lowering your wages $2 an hour, $3 an hour for a number of those workers. And a union organizing effort is underway. And I happened to go up there to talk to some of the workers, and a woman raises her hand. And she says, you know, Bernie, I was just looking. We get notification from Social Security every so often about how much money we've accumulated and how much money we're going to get. She said, I was looking at my record. She's a middle-aged woman. And she said, you know, 20 years ago, I was making $23,000 a year. Today, I am making $25,000 a year. After 20 years, she's making $2,000 a year more, which means in real inflation-accounted wages, a significant decline in her standard of living. That is her reality, and in fact, that is the reality for tens of millions of American people. I am delighted that President Bush has suddenly realized that our economy is in trouble. Isn't that nice? After 7 years where the middle class has shrunk, where poverty has increased, President Bush has become aware that the economy is in trouble. And that's good. But the reality is that we are living in an unprecedented time economically for the American worker. And the big lie that has been perpetrated year after year is that our economy is strong, our economy is robust. And that is a big lie. Because the reality is that the middle class is shrinking, ordinary people are working longer hours for lower wages, and the gap between the rich and the poor is wider today than it has been at any time since the 1920s. Today, nearly 5 million more Americans have slipped into poverty since Bush was elected president. Not something that we talk about. 5 million more people have slipped into poverty, and we have by far the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country in the world. One of the great disgraces in this country. 1 out of 5 children lives in poverty, and you know what the corollary of that is? We lock more people up in jail than any other country in the world. I believe we lock more people up in jail than China does. So you ignore the needs of children, you let them grow up in poor housing, poor education, no child care, and lo and behold, we're shocked that at the age of 10, they drop out of society and they become self-destructive and do criminal activity. Today, median household income for working-age Americans has declined by $2,500 since Bush has been president. Over 8.5 million people have lost their health insurance. We have lost over 3 million good-paying manufacturing jobs in this small state alone. We have lost 25% of our manufacturing jobs in the last 6 years. And that is part of the transformation of the American economy, such that 25 years ago, GM, General Motors, was the largest employer in the world. Good wages, good benefits, strong union. Today, who is the largest employer in the United States? Walmart. Low wages, low benefits, vehemently anti-union. That's the transformation of the American economy. In Vermont, since Bush has been president, gas prices have increased by 80%. Heating oil prices have more than doubled. Health care premiums have increased by nearly 27%. College tuition has gone up by almost 15%. And the number of Vermont residents without health insurance has risen by 12,000 people. Yes, President Bush, the economy has some problems. But the reason that Bush and his friends really haven't noticed it until very recently is that when they go talking about the economy to their friends, everybody is telling them how great things are. And the reality is, for all of you who are in the top 1%, for all of you in this room who are millionaires and billionaires, things, in fact, are going very, very well. So what do we have to do? What we have to do for a start, and why conferences like this are so important and why it is really nice to see young people here, is to not only move to transform our economy, more importantly, we have got to move to transform our consciousness. Next Sunday, tens and tens and tens of millions of Americans will be watching their TVs intently to find out if New England is going to win the Super Bowl. I know, many of us want that to happen. But I have to tell you there's something more important. If we could put just a fraction of our time and our energy into figuring out how we create an economy that works for the middle class, how we have a national health care program that guarantees health care to all people, how we have an educational system so that we get quality education through graduate school regardless of one's ability to pay. If we could spend a fraction of our time worrying about those issues, we could go a long way in transforming America. And one of the issues that we have to focus on, which is virtually not talked about by the media, and when we talk about transforming America, we obviously have got to understand the role that the corporate media plays. When we look at the economy, there are, in fact, some people who are winners, and those are the people on top. And what we have got to insist upon is a serious discussion as to why the United States has, by far, the most unequal distribution of wealth and income of any major country on earth. In our country today, the top 300,000 earners earn more money than the bottom 150 million earners. Richest 1% own more wealth than do the bottom 90%. Now, how often have you turned on your TV and seen a discussion about the moral implications of that? Among all our religious friends, how often have you seen a discussion about whether it is appropriate that some people have billions of dollars while other people sleep out on the street, and there are kids in this country who do not have enough food to eat? So I think one of the main points that I want to make to you, especially to the young people, is you have got to go into your own hearts and make your own analyses, make your own moral and social judgments about the propriety of what is going on. Don't let CBS make those judgments for you. Don't let NBC tell you that the Britney Spears story is more important than whether or not our people have health insurance, or the difficult times of Paris Hilton. She'll do just fine. Our worry has got to be on the needs of working families in this country. Now, what are some of the things that we have got to do to transform the economy? For a start, we have got to understand that one of the reasons that the middle class is in decline and poverty is growing is that there has been a war against trade unionism in this country for the last 40 years. And that if we are going to create an equitable society, an egalitarian society, we have got to make sure that workers have the right to form unions, and we have to be sure that when a union is formed, it cannot be broken. As everybody here knows or should know, union workers earn 30% more on average than non-union workers. 80% of union workers have employer-provided health insurance. Only 49% of non-union workers do. 68% of union workers have a guaranteed pension through a defined benefit plan. Only 14% of non-union workers do. And on it goes. So the reason that we are living in a society where the ruling class is vehemently anti-union is they know what everybody in this room should know, is that when working people stand together and are able to negotiate a contract, common sense dictates and the facts tell us they will do a lot better economically than going before a company all by themselves. Now, if we can get the votes, as some of you know, in the House of Representatives, the Employee Free Choice Act was passed, which would have made a profound change in labor relations in America. We have the votes in the Senate to pass it as well, but our Republican friends chose to filibuster the issue. We couldn't pass it. With a few more votes and with a president who is prepared to sign that legislation, we will be in a position where if 50 workers in a bargaining unit plus one sign a card saying they want to belong to a union, they will be able to belong to a union. If we are serious about transforming our economy, we need to rethink from the very, very bottom of the discussion our entire trade policy, which has been a disaster for workers in this country. Our demand must be that we stop the process by which corporate America is throwing millions of American workers out on the street, moving to low-wage countries, and bringing their products back in here. Our demand must be that corporate America start reinvesting in this country, that we have a trade policy which is based on principles of fairness and not just corporate greed. We must end corporate welfare to large multinational corporations that export our jobs overseas. We must work on issues such as employee ownership, and we must, among other things, rescind the huge tax breaks that Bush has given to the wealthiest 1%. Let me just conclude before I bring up our guest by saying this. I understand very well that many people are depressed about the political situation in this country. Hey, I'm in the Senate. I know about depression about the political situation. But what I want to tell you, and I hope you'll never forget this, is sometimes things happen, and they happen very quickly. Despite what you may see on TV or read in the newspapers, there is massive dissatisfaction with the direction in which this country is going. There is a reason why Bush will go down in history as perhaps the least popular president, certainly in the modern history of America, because the people understand that in every single area he is leading us, from Iraq to the environment to healthcare to the economy, he is moving us in the wrong direction. And despite what politicians are saying, ordinary people understand that they're working longer hours for lower wages, despite the fact that worker productivity is going up. And they are extraordinarily upset that unless things change, their kids, for the first time in the modern history of America, will have a lower standard of living than they do. That's not what the American dream is about. My parents, many of your parents, worked hard so that we can go to college and do better than they did. That was the case in my family. And yet now what we're seeing is kids who, everything being equal, will have a lower standard of living than their parents. People understand that. People understand that it is a bit absurd that we are the only nation in the industrialized world that does not have a national health care program. They understand the immorality of the growing gap between the rich and the poor. Now, the bottom line is that people understand it, but we're not organized. But if the day comes, and I believe that it is coming, we stand together. As they often say, the leaders will follow the people. And that's what our job is, and that is what this conference is about. So my parting words are, the issues you are talking about today are the most important issues that ordinary people feel in their guts. Right now, as we sit here, there's a guy down the road who's filling up his gas tank, makes $25,000 a year, and is paying $3.15 for a gallon of gas while the oil companies enjoy record-breaking profits. And that guy is angry, he's disgusted, as is the senior citizen who's trying to figure out how she's going to keep warm this winter, as is the young worker who graduated from college and can't get a decent job. So what our business is about, and it's not easy, but what our business is about is bringing together all of those people who have a common interest in an economy that works for us all, and transform America so that not only will our own people have a sense of pride that we don't have now, but that once again this nation will be placed in a position of leadership in the entire world from a moral perspective, where once again people will say, thank you, America, for the leadership that you are showing. Thank you very much. Thank you. We have a great panel, and I know 3 out of the 4 panelists anyhow. And I know that the words that you're going to hear from them are not just rhetoric, it's not just a speech they put together this morning. These are people who have worked year after year after year, struggling for the rights of working people, and it's really wonderful that they're all here this morning. Larry Cohen was elected president of the CWA, the Communications Workers of America, in 2005. He is, in fact, and I can tell you this from personal experience, certainly one of the leading and most progressive leaders of the American labor movement. Larry is the founder of one of the great organizations that has had just a huge impact, I think, emotionally, morally in this country, and that is Jobs with Justice, which was started in 1987 as a workers' rights solidarity network, and now, 20 years later, has grown to include over 40 vibrant workers' rights coalitions all over the country. We are really pleased and honored to have one of the great labor leaders in America with us this morning. Larry, thanks very much for being here.
Thanks, Bernie. Senator Sanders, whatever. I always think of him as Bernie. Everybody else here does too, right? And he is amazing. And it's interesting because although we did see each other last night on the plane coming up here by coincidence, you know, we didn't sort of talk about what we were each going to do. And Bernie, I got to sort of kick this off this morning, so this contribution for me is going to be shorter. But I talked this morning about, you know, building a political movement, Labor 2008, 4 issues. 1, Employee Free Choice Act. 2, health care. 3, jobs and fair trade. 4, retirement security. And we didn't rehearse that talk. You just gave it all, right? So I think that's more important than a coincidence because, you know, here's one of our most amazing political leaders in this country, you know, on that program. And, you know, it's just more evidence, you know, that we are on the right track, that we're not alone, that this is not some wild-eyed idea, even though he's been called that at times, not so much recently, and that together, today, in those workshops, you know, we're moving one step forward on that road, on each of those issues. Bernie, the only thing I would disagree with that you said is that the war on workers started 40 years ago. We would actually say 60. We're getting older. And Bernie was there with us on December 11th when we had the World Labor Movement's leadership there, the National Labor Center, you know, elected heads from around the world, general secretaries from around the world, coming to this joint session of the House and Senate with that giant bar graph that I held up this morning, right, Bernie, showing the U.S. at the very bottom, way behind South Africa now and Brazil, as well as all the European countries, Australia, etc. And the second chart, which was slightly different than this one, showing the consequences of that in terms of an economy for the middle class, for working Americans. And so you see on that chart that in these other countries, 100% of the country, in Australia, Canada, France, Japan, Spain, Sweden, is covered by public health care expenditures. And I know we're going to hear more about health care from the other panelists. But again, we want to think of the connections in our movement and the connections in these issues. Now, Bernie, you talked about St. Albans, and I mentioned this to you yesterday, you know, in the bus to the plane. In D.C., you have to take a bus to the plane. I know it sounds strange. But we have 3 sisters here from Dover, New Hampshire. Would you guys stand up? And they got organized. They organized at the Passport Center, the customer service center that we all use around the country if we have an issue with our passports, and it is subcontracted also, but the subcontractor is an AT&T company, and we negotiated, even though it's not the law of the United States, 20 years ago, and we have to fight every year to keep it, neutrality and card check there. And these sisters, supported by their local 1298, were able to organize 600 workers there, get recognition, and now, as you know, because of the worst labor board ever, I call them the slave labor board, that recognition got held up while it was posted that if 30% of the workers, they had to have 50%, they actually had 60-some%, but 50% sign up for the union. But under a new ruling of the worst labor board ever, if 30% of the workers sign a petition, the posting said that the National Labor Board will come in here and hold an election to decertify the union. But I'm proud to say that these sisters stamped out that petition, despite support from the Right to Work Committee, and that petition was not filed, and now they get to go to the bargaining table. And so we keep hope alive, stories like this, or St. Albans. Stories when we win, or stories when we fight and don't necessarily win that day. And as Bernie said, we overwhelmingly passed the Employee Free Choice Act in the House of Representatives. The woman that I call the best speaker ever, Nancy Pelosi, forget that she's the first woman. That may be interesting to some. Best speaker ever, check it out. Left her podium, walked to the floor, and said, I'm taking the floor to speak on this bill. It's unprecedented. I was with George Miller on Wednesday, Chairman, House Education and Labor Committee, and we're talking about what is our strategy to pass Employee Free Choice Act. And again, all it would do is take that experience in Dover and apply it to St. Albans, everywhere in Vermont and across this country in the private sector, and then we have to fight for it in the public sector. There's many public sector workers here today. Those rights are enjoyed by workers almost everywhere in the world. When is it our time? That's what we're going to say in the U.S. Senate. And I know Bernie will say it in that loud a voice next year when we have a Democratic president who will not just sign the bill, but hopefully fight for the bill like everybody in this room will. And George Miller, Bernie, said to me on Wednesday, sitting in his office, that we will not start over in 2009, that we will start with exactly where we left this bill in 2007, and that if we have a Democratic president, as long as we have Nancy Pelosi as the Speaker, we will enact that bill 12 or 13 months from now. Can you imagine what it'll be like to wake up on that day as working Americans, whether we're union or not, and know that we've brought 21st century rights back to the United States? What it'll be like to wake up that day and know that at Comcast down the street, or Verizon Wireless down the street, or in St. Albans, and in every manufacturing plant, and service workers, and hopefully farm workers in Florida as well, that we'll be able to organize and fight back and not wait for somebody to hand us something? That's what it'll be like. Now, as I said on Wednesday to George Miller, George, he's another one, Bernie, George, there aren't too many like that. George, what if we launch a 1 million-member mobilization in behalf of this bill? That 1 million members, not just of unions, but 1 million members of Jobs with Justice, Student Labor Action Project, of progressive groups across America, this is easily within our reach. Spend 10 minutes on the Employee Free Choice Act. 10 minutes. Now in Australia, my friend Sharon Burrow, she was there that day, the leader of the Australian teacher, leader of the Australian labor movement. In fact, she's the leader of the International Trade Union Confederation. They spent 2.5 years to get rid of the Howard government, the worst government they've ever had in Australia. One of the only other governments that supported Bush on Iraq, I might add. And they mobilized 1 million people. It took more than 10 minutes because they actually had, in a much smaller country, they had 600,000 people in the streets of Sydney on one day. But that is a recent indication that what we're fighting for is not left over from the 20th century. If this can be done in Australia, if it can be done in South Africa, which, as I mentioned before, has gone from 10% to 45% covered by bargaining rights and ended apartheid, 10 minutes, million-member mobilization, that each one of us, online or at the door, or even better, at the workplace, sign up in this next year, and we're launching this in many ways here today. We haven't even launched this yet in my union. And we sign up, and we stick our picture on the back of that sign up, whether it's a card online or whatever. And then we bring to Congress next year, in a creative way, we're good at that, the million members who have signed up to say, I will stand up for workers' rights in America. I will fight back. We will make a difference together. And that speaker and leadership like Leahy and Sanders and Kennedy and others will take the floor in the Senate and the House, and that president, whoever it is in the White House, and say to the corporate pigs, they call themselves lobbyists, but every pig has their day. We used to say in Philadelphia, today's pigs, tomorrow's bacon. I know there's different ways to express that, but when they say that this is some union bill, we will have the faces of 1 million Americans there in Washington. 10 minutes. In Australia, the chant was, our rights at work, worth working for. Our rights at work, worth voting for. Our rights at work, worth joining for. And so we build on that, and we say, our bargaining rights worth working for, and our bargaining rights worth voting for. Because in addition to the president, we have a plan, as Bernie said, and New England is critical. He had 52 votes with him and Kennedy for this bill. We can get it to at least 59, if not 60. 60 guarantees we cut off a filibuster. But we get into the high 50s. There's many different ways to get past that filibuster as well. That means electing Shaheen. Shaheen's going to meet with those Dover workers in the next few weeks. Not only to say, as she said to me, I'm running for the Senate in New Hampshire, I will beat Sununu, and I support the Employee Free Choice Act. And she's going to meet with those workers and say, not only that, but I will fight to keep that passport center work in New Hampshire. And I know Bernie will join that fight even though it's not in Vermont. Because exactly as you said, Bernie, there's a threat to their jobs as well to move it somewhere else with some new contractor where they'd have no right to organize. And Tom Allen, running for the Senate in Maine, is another part of that road to 60. And we have the list. I'm not going to go through it all here. But the point is that in addition to that electoral work, we need to take it into our hearts, what this really means. Because it sounds like technical mumbo-jumbo, you know, 50% sign up, you get union recognition. If you can't get a contract, it goes to an arbitrator, and the arbitrator can impose the first contract. And also real damages for workers for employers who screw workers. Right now, they get nothing happens to them. That's the third part. It's really those three things. But the important thing is this. If we work together, right here in Vermont and across this country, and demonstrate to ourselves, to our unions, to our progressive organizations, whatever they are, that we understand the connection between bringing back bargaining rights in America and all these other examples of economic justice that Bernie checked off, that we need to have a labor movement to join with the other elements of a progressive movement, and that if we have a way that people can join a union that's simple, that the sisters in Dover saw firsthand and it happened firsthand, that we will again have a labor movement that can hold its head high, that can elect progressives across this country, and that can help bring about the kind of country with health care for all, with a trade policy instead of when we get rid of the next job, with retirement security that again gets back to being at least half the wage you made before you retired. We've forgotten all about that. That was the promise 70 years ago when Roosevelt was president. Half the wage you had before you retired. Every other one of those countries I showed you on that graph has at least that and more. Typically 65% of your last wage is your retirement wage. These should be our dreams. This is what we pass to our children. This is worth working for, our bargaining rights. This is worth fighting for. This is worth voting for. And we kick that off today here in Vermont, million-member mobilization, and I'm confident that Bernie Sanders will be there when that bill is signed next March or April of 2009. Let's do it.
Thank you very much, Larry. Our next speaker comes to us not from the nation's capital, but from 2 blocks away from here, where she is a nurse at the Fletcher Allen Hospital and the head of the nurses union there. We were all inspired a number of years ago when Jen Henry and the other nurses organized their union, when they reached out to the community to make the point that that union organizing effort was not just for them, it was for all of us who use the hospital, who want quality care, who don't want to see our nurses exhausted, who want good staffing patterns at the hospital. Jen has been a leader not only for our nurses, but for the entire state labor movement. Let's welcome Jennifer Henry.
So it seems a little wrong to have a healthcare worker speaking who's lost her voice, but I hope that you'll bear with me. As I look around the room today, I see so many old friends, people that I've seen since I became a union activist. So many familiar faces, but I also see lots of new faces, and it gives me hope because I believe that we are building a movement. And I was asked to come here today not just to talk about health care, but to talk about how we at the local level build a movement for improving whatever it is that we need to be able to do. So what does it mean to actually build a movement? It means that you support and empower individuals to believe that the solution to their problems is to act collectively to represent their common interests. That may seem really simple to you, but remember, everyone sees themselves as an individual, and it's our job to help connect them through their common interests. And acting collectively doesn't just happen. It's an investment in individuals to help them understand the issues, to help them see their common interests, and then to help them act collectively. So we all know people who aren't here today, people in our families, our neighborhoods, our workplaces. We know what the issues are. We've heard them. They've resonated today through all of the speakers and all of the workshops. But to build a movement, we must bring the issues to the people who aren't here. For me, that's 1,650 nurse members at Fletcher Allen Healthcare, as well as almost 3,000 faculty members and other education members as part of my state federation in the state of Vermont, the United Professions. We have to meet them where they are. So if they're afraid, if they're concerned about the things that they've heard from the commercials they're going to hear during the Super Bowl, all the publicity they hear about what bad things will happen when we get workers' rights, when we get the employee-free choice. They've heard scary things. And the way for them to address their fears is to be able to have somebody that they know that they can ask those silly questions, or they can talk to you about what they're afraid of, because they're not going to come here and talk about what they're afraid of. They're going to do it with you personally, and that's really important to be able to make those connections. Then and only then can we help them see that they can use their collective strength and power to demand and expect change. Just as an example, last year we brought together our nurse members who work in small clinics from all over the state. As they registered on their way in, we asked them to just jot down 3 of their top issues. We had a really nice dinner together, And then I took a few minutes to show them that even though they worked in Rutland and Newport and St. Albans and Berlin and in the Burlington area, that they all shared extremely similar concerns about their workplaces. They suddenly saw themselves as part of a larger whole. That's such, you can't skip that step and expect people to be able to act collectively. We talked about where the power was within them to create a strong union, that there wasn't a union in Burlington or in Washington, D.C. that was going to advocate on their behalf and that would solve all of their problems. That will make things better, but the union exists within each one of them. So we gave them hope, and we asked them to have the courage to enforce their contract and enforce their rights for their patients and for themselves. In our profession, most people won't do things for themselves. They'll do things for their patients. And that may be different in different workplaces, but finding out that what they cared about most was the quality and safety of care for their patients, and then compelling them to create change for the people they cared about most. For some people, it's their families. For some people, it's the people that they serve. But that was a key piece of our success in talking to them. We asked them to think about the next generation of nurses and what our legacy would be. Would we be the weakest generation? And would patient safety and the quality of care continue to be eroded? Or would we use our collective strength to support each other and use our voices to stand up for what we believed in? A very quiet nurse that never speaks up at any meetings took me aside at the end of the dinner, and she said, "I had no idea that we had any power. I was feeling tired and burned out before I came, and I can't work any harder. But now I feel stronger, and I know I want to work to make things better at my workplace." And she asked me if I would help her. Touchdown for my home team. It's all about personal relationships because they break down fear. They help people feel strong and confident. It's about investing time in people and helping people find their voice. And if anybody finds mine, I'd really appreciate it. And as I said, there's no shortcut. The power lies within each one of us and with each one of the people that we can reach when we leave here today. Tony Benn is a wonderful British labor activist and leader. And in the movie Sicko, he said the following things, and I carry them with me every day. An educated, healthy, and confident nation is hard to govern. They always say everyone should vote, but I think if the poor in Britain or the United States turned out and voted for the people who represented their interests, it would be a real democratic revolution. They don't want it to happen, meaning the corporations, so they keep people hopeless and pessimistic. Well, we have elected many good people, and they need us. I am not hopeless, and I am certainly not pessimistic. I believe in the power of people to build a movement for health care for all, for livable wages, and for workers' rights. Do you believe in the power of the people of this wonderful state and this country? Yes. Good. We're educated, and we're healthy, and we are confident. And as organizers, we are willing to build relationships across the state and the nation. The powers that try to keep us in this wonderful working people of our state and our nation poor and afraid should learn that they need to fear us. Thank you.
The Vermont NEA is the state's largest union, representing over 11,500 teachers and education support professionals, has been in the forefront fighting for living wages and quality health care for its members and advocating for the highest standards of public education. I can say that just a few months ago, Angelo did a great job in bringing teachers together at Burlington High School to talk about how we get rid of or fundamentally change the disastrous No Child Left Behind bill. Please welcome NEA President Angelo Dorta.
Thank you. Thank you, and thanks to Jen, Bernie, Larry for those inspiring words and for the inspiration that all of you provide by being here today. I'm very proud to represent our 11,500 members across the state, hardworking teachers, school support staff. We're on this same journey with all of you and all of our brother and sister labor organizations. And in fact, we've learned, and we've had to learn over several decades, the important lesson of working together. You know, I know the perception out there in this state is that teachers have it pretty good. And frankly, we do have it pretty good in many areas. We have it pretty good because we got collective bargaining rights in this state in 1969. And we've exercised those collective bargaining rights for nearly 4 decades now. And just keep in mind that collective bargaining rights for public employees didn't come to the fore until almost 1960, when the state of Wisconsin passed, I believe, the very first state-level public employee bargaining laws in the country. So we've had the privilege and the responsibility of exercising those rights. Now, we have those rights, but we also have a bit of an added burden. Our salaries, our health care benefits, any of our monetary benefits are paid for through public tax dollars. And you know, you've been to town meetings. You're aware of the anti-tax sentiment that's raged across this country over the last 20 years or so. People look at their tax bills. They look at what they're paying for public services and public employees very carefully, and they should. And they should. None of us like to pay taxes needlessly, and we want to make sure our tax dollars are going to the right causes. Well, frankly, what other important public services might there be that are more important than the future of our children, the quality of education we can provide them, which directly impacts not only their own economic well-being as adults, but also impacts the well-being of the society in terms of the jobs they take, in terms of their awareness around social justice issues, in terms of their being informed citizens who can participate in the public elections process. So yes, education is an extremely important societal responsibility. And we need to be aware of that, all of us as well as my members. We've been seen as having it relatively good because salary gains in education, public education, have been relatively difficult to come by over several decades. And so before Vermont NEA was the force that it is today in terms of our ability to support local teachers associations, help them through the collective bargaining process, give them the training that will benefit them and their employees and their communities. We've had to learn by experience. We've needed to work with those local associations to develop their skills and their knowledge around collective bargaining. That's something that we all need to continue to do. As Jen mentioned, like nurses, teachers and school support employees, their first responsibilities they feel very keenly is to the students in those schools. They hate to be distracted from that primary responsibility. So to me, it's enlightening that in the space of 1 year, we had 4 teacher strikes in this state between May 2005 and May 2006. In Orleans County at Lake Region Union High School, in Colchester, in Barry, and in Green Mountain NEA in the Chittenden East School District. All 4 of those strikes were precipitated by a battle over health care benefits and health insurance and the cost shifting that they were faced with. It takes a lot for a teacher group, for a school employee group to decide to go out on strike, to decide to withhold their services from those students and from that community. But that is the pressure that teachers and school employees were feeling relative to the ongoing constant cost shift regarding health insurance. We've gone through several phases. We had it good, so to speak, because when those wage gains were harder to come by, school boards would say, well, take a little less in salary, we'll give you some benefits. And for a number of years, in the 70s and early 80s, we, in essence, traded salary gains for improved health insurance benefits. And so at the end of the 80s and the beginning of the 90s, when school boards wanted to reopen contract negotiations, to shift more of the responsibility and payment for health insurance onto us, when we started facing demands at the bargaining table for higher premium co-payments and higher deductibles, bargaining cycle after bargaining cycle, we said, but we've paid for these already through concessions in the past. And at that point, I think in the early 90s, we quickly became aware of the fact that this cycle is going to repeat itself over and over again. No matter how much you give back in health insurance or in other benefit areas, no matter what concessions you've made in the past, there's always going to be the demand to concede more in the future. And that's why we take great pride in training our members, not only in the skills and knowledge around collective bargaining, but trying to instill the confidence in them so that they can say no at the bargaining table, so they can go to impasse, so they can use our supportive services, and if necessary, take the final step of withholding their services. So we had it good for a while. We faced the same pressures that we've all been facing over the last 10 and 15 years. We even went the route of creating our own health insurance trust. We basically defined our interest at this time as to what was best for our members, teachers and school employees. And we worked together with the Vermont School Board's Insurance Trust to create a group called VHI, the Vermont Educators Health Initiative. It is today the largest book of business for Blue Cross Blue Shield. And we thought we were doing enough at that point. We were taking care of our members by helping to design options for health insurance plans at the state level that they could then bargain over with their school boards. But you know what? We didn't define our interests broadly enough. Because although that's been successful and continues to be successful, there's new pressures right now that we've even been facing. So it never ends. The lesson that we finally learned and where we settle today, and what I'm happy to proclaim to you, is that 2 years ago, we joined with our other labor organizations in a coalition, joined together with them in a much more comprehensive way than we ever did before. And we formed the Working Vermont Labor Coalition. And Dan Brush, a printer and Teamster union leader, was, I think, the very first union leader to bring us all together and say, we should be doing more together. And out of that 2-year labor coalition, a year later, emerged the Vermont Campaign for Healthcare Security, which has worked hard to define comprehensive coverage for all Vermonters and to get that into legislation, and is now working to sign up all Vermonters who fit the criteria in terms of income status, work status, and working now still to expand the coverage and the employment criteria so we can get all Vermonters together. So it's only in this final stage that Vermont has finally learned the lesson, I believe, that really needs to be learned. We can take care of our individual members as best we can, and many of us are very successful in doing that. But until we realize that you have to look beyond your union, beyond your own membership, look to the common interests of all the labor groups and working people in general, that's when we'll truly be effective, and that's when we'll truly achieve the goals that all of us desire. Thank you very much. It's a real honor to be here today.
Last but absolutely not least, our final speaker is Angelo DiGiulio, of the Student Labor Action Project. And if there is anything that is, I think, very wise about today, we're holding this event on campus, because I think all of you know that we are not going to succeed unless we bring into the movement the energy and the idealism of young people, and that is certainly symbolized by the work that Angela has done. She's been active in the SLAP movement here on campus for many years, is also a member of the Burlington Livable City Coalition fighting for living wages. Please welcome Angelo DiGiulio.
Thank you so much. I'm going to move this down. Definitely the shortest. So I just want to start by thanking everyone who made this day possible. So many people worked really hard on this. And to all the workers who are working here today at UVM and who work here every day, of all kinds of work, we really appreciate it. I don't think you hear that enough, so we appreciate it. So I just wanted to start by reflecting on something that Bernie said that I think was really important, and that's this sudden awareness that's happening. I think it's happening with everyone. It's so funny how now we can talk about healthcare, and no matter where people felt or fell on the issue before, everyone can acknowledge that there's a problem with our healthcare system, that it's broken. And also that with wages and jobs and our economy, finally, our politicians and people all over the place can say, okay, yeah, there's a problem. Because before, when you say there's no problem, you know, people who felt like they were having the problem, it was self-blame. You know, and I think that was that's something we need to move beyond, because when we can finally have this awareness of and truth about what's going on in our economy and what's going on in our homes and our schools, then we can actually truly move forward. And an event like this, I think, is a great opportunity to have a lot of truth. And even when I saw some people outside of workshops just chatting, and I think that's awesome, because that's what a real forum is all about, is making those connections. And I hope that if you take away anything from this event, that you take away some new connections that you've made with people. Any like new unions you've heard about and you never met the people, just any new people you've met, it's really important. So we have to maintain that, and we're really lucky in a small state like Vermont to be able to maintain such connections, because, I mean, you see your legislators walking down the street. You know, that doesn't happen everywhere. So yeah, this is a place for true issues. This is a place for a lot of truth, not talking about John Edwards' hair or why Hillary cried, you know, or Britney Spears. We're not talking about that. So anyway, I just wanted to mention too that another real moment of truth for me I just had my winter break this December and January, and I was blessed with an opportunity to work with the United Electrical Workers up in St. Albans. Yeah, you got to cheer for them. They're amazing. So I had the opportunity to work with Kim Lawson, who is the lead staff organizer on the campaign for the St. Albans workers, people working for Stanley, which is the new subcontracted group that's coming in, who is the employer of the people working for immigration services up there. And so I was helping with that campaign, and something that Kim said one day, it was just an amazing opportunity for me. I was an assistant, and for the first 2 weeks I had no idea what was going on. So it was a great introduction for me, because this campaign, it's going still well, it's still happening. You really should look it up online, and it's amazing. But Kim is an amazing organizer, and she was someone who was really helpful to learn from, because one day during an organizing committee meeting, luckily the UE had an office in St. Albans that was right down the street from most of the offices where these workers work every day, so they could stop by like on a lunch break for their organizing committee meetings, and it was really easy for them to do and really accessible. So we were lucky for that. But on one day, it was an organizing committee meeting, and Kim, you know, was going through what was going to be happening, the agenda and everything, and there was some doubt in the crowd. I mean, that happens all the time with unionizing campaigns. It's difficult to have a voice, and a lot of times with union busting, but even less than that, even before union busters come out, there's intimidation, and it's everywhere. I mean, it's everywhere, and we need to acknowledge that and stand up and have a voice, just like Jen was saying. So, so what Kim said one day is, you guys know you already have the union, right? You guys are the union. And I think that that was so powerful, and that gave so many people such hope that the UE didn't have to come in there and unionize people, that these people were building this connection. I mean, the UE would give them some great power in being able to negotiate their wages and have their benefits settled for them so that they're not paying for health care for an entire month but not actually receiving it, which happened this December to some people, which is not okay. And so the fact that she said that, I think that that's happening right here, that this is a union, that we're all a union. And I think that's really important to know, that we've got it. And so that's really empowering, and I think that that needs to be spread around our country, and that Vermont's a really small state, but we can be a leader in a lot of places. Bernie is our wonderful representative that can help us lead Vermont and help us lead our country in a better direction. So thank you so much for having me here today.
We originally were going to have some questions, but some of us, mostly me, talked for too long, and I apologize for that, but we have an agenda that we have to move along on. So let me just conclude by, again, thanking all of our fantastic panelists. And as Angela just said, if we believe we are together in our hearts, if we have common interest, if we're prepared to stand together, we are a union. And as a union, we can transform our state, we can transform this country, we can lead the world in a new direction. Thank you all for being here today.
Okay, so thank you to the panel. Great job. I want to thank all the volunteers, all the people that helped make this conference happen. Angela did a tremendous amount of work, and there was the folks at the registration table, all the facilitators. Really great event. Thank you to everyone. And of course, thank you to all the service workers, folks working for the university and Seduxo, who have been working hard to help make this event happen. Folks, we're going to wrap it up in a sec, but I just want to say, obviously, there was a lot of exciting stuff that we talked about today, but our work is cut out for us. We have a lot to do, and basically not talking to each other, but talking to people out there, people at our workplaces, people in our communities, and really getting involved. One quick piece of business right after this, we're going to try to do a group photo with everyone. So I'm going to make a few announcemements, but we're going to gather right outside of the parking lot in the circle area for a group photo with our banners. But there's a bunch of things I just want to announce really quickly. This was a part of a week of action. As many of you know, there's a few more events today. One of them is a 4 p.m. climate change panel at the Contois Auditorium. Tonight at 6:30, the Worker Center is having a social reception at our new space in the Old North End, 294 North Winooski. You are all invited. 6:30 p.m. We're billing it as a social forum social. We're going to have a quick presentation about the World Social Forum and the U.S. Social Forum process, hear from some of the folks at the Worker Center sent down there this summer, and then just basically hang out and get to know each other. So I hope folks that are going to be around can stick around for that event. On an organizing front, Monday, the Burlington Livable City Coalition is doing a livable wage button day. So these livable wage buttons, a bunch of them are now gone off the Worker Center table. They're available at our office, at the Peace and Justice Center. Lots of you probably have them at home. We're going to all wear them on Monday at our workplaces and in our communities. So at Fletcher Allen, at UVM, at the Burlington schools, in City Market, at the Howard Center, where there's unions, and for folks that don't have unions, wear the buttons. The food service workers and the other support staff in Burlington schools are in negotiations Monday and Tuesday, and they're getting really close to following on the footsteps of the paraeducators and having another historic livable wage victory. So please wear your livable wage buttons on Button Day on Monday. Another event on February 7th, there's a healthcare lobby day. Folks, anyone in this room that doesn't believe that we need to have healthcare as a basic right, well, I don't think there's many people in this room that don't believe that. So we need to all get together. Last time when people came out, 200 people came out during the day in the beginning of January to support the H304 bill, which is a possible step in the direction of making health care a basic right and having it decoupled from employment. So join that effort, 10:30, February 7th. As Angelo mentioned, there's a big group of workers that are organizing for this federal contractor up in St. Albans under the Stanley. Carmen Stanko, the president of the union here at UVM Service and Maintenance, could not be with us today because she's doing house calls, doing what we should be doing, talking to people about why they should be joining the union. So, and there's a bunch of other folks that are doing that today. They're going to have a really difficult fight ahead of them. This is a nasty company with nasty union busters out of Arlington, Virginia. So stay tuned for ways to support their struggle. In this building and at university, there's been ongoing fights for livable wages and the right to organize for all the workers in the staff. The United Staff has been fighting hard, and SLAP has been leading the way. That's a fight that's going to go on this semester, and until every worker at UVM, whether they work for the university or if they work for Seduxo, gets a livable wage and has the right to organize, that campaign is going to continue. Finally, I just wanted to mention that this is the 10th anniversary of the Worker Center. Where the Worker Center was... Thank you. The folks, some of the folks in this room helped start the organization officially about 10 years ago. And just stay tuned. On April 27th, we're going to have a big celebration at the old Labor Hall in Barrie to celebrate that. And I hope all of you can come and bring more folks so we can celebrate this struggle. But as we go out and organize in our communities to make it a real thing happening today, we're going to have a march as part of this week of action. Out after the group photo, we're going to march downtown under the themes that health care should be a right for everyone, to bring the troops home, and climate justice. So join us for the march after the group photo. We're going to all get together outside of the building on the parking lot side in the circle area for a group photo. Folks that have the banners and want to have them in the shot, please bring your banners, and we'll meet down there in a few minutes. Thanks, everybody.